Samuel Washington sat on his wooden porch, watching the sun go down behind the tall mountains. The sky turned orange and red as day became night. At 78 years old, Samuel had deep brown skin with wrinkles that showed his long life of hard work and learning. His white beard was neatly trimmed, and his hands, though now shaky with age, had once written complex science papers that changed how people understood the universe. 5 years ago, Samuel had moved to this small cabin in Montana. After teaching physics at a famous university for over 40 years, he wanted peace and quiet after a lifetime of proving himself in rooms where he was often the only black person present. "Nothing beats a Montana sunset," Samuel said to himself, sipping hot tea from his favorite blue mug. His old dog Buck lay at his feet, gray around the muzzle like his owner. The peaceful evening changed when Samuel noticed something strange in the darkening sky. At first he thought it might be a plane or maybe a weather balloon, but this light moved differently. It zigzagged in ways that no human aircraft could, then stopped completely above the trees near his property. "Well, that's mighty unusual," Samuel said, putting down his mug and standing up slowly. His knees hurt from old age, making him reach for his walking cane. Buck lifted his head and gave a low growl. "Easy, boy," Samuel said, patting the dog's head. "Let's see what we've got here." The light grew brighter, casting strange shadows across Samuel's yard and the pine tree surrounding his home. Then it began to descend, slowly and carefully, into the clearing about 50 yards from his porch. Samuel wasn't a man who scared easily. After facing angry mobs during civil rights marches in the 1960s and dealing with unfair treatment throughout his career, a strange light hardly seemed worth running from. Buck barked once, then hid behind Samuel's legs as the light touched down, on the ground. The glow dimmed enough for Samuel to see it wasn't just a light but a metal craft about the size of a school bus. It had no wings, no propellers, and no engines that Samuel could see. The surface was smooth and shiny, reflecting the last bits of sunset. "Fascinating," Samuel whispered, his scientist's mind already trying to understand what he was seeing. Steam appeared in the side of the craft and bright white light poured out from inside. Samuel shielded his eyes with his hand. When he looked again, he saw figures standing in the opening. They were not human. They stood about 7 feet tall with slim bodies. Their skin seemed to change color slightly as they moved, shifting between blue and green like the feathers on a hummingbird's neck. They had large heads with no hair and huge black eyes that reflected the stars now appearing in the night sky. Most people would have run away or called for help. Samuel Washington just nodded to himself and thought about all the science fiction books he had read throughout his life. He had always believed life existed beyond Earth. Now he had proof standing in his yard. "Hello there," Samuel called out, his deep voice steady and calm. "Welcome to Earth. More specifically, welcome to Montana." The beings turned toward his voice. 3 of them stepped out of the craft and onto the soil of Earth, for what Samuel guessed was the first time. They moved gracefully despite the different gravity. The tallest one, with silver patterns on its head, approached Samuel but stopped about 10 feet away. "Human," it said in perfect English, though the voice sounded odd like it was coming through water. "We search for Earth leader." Samuel almost laughed. "Well, you're about as far from world leaders as you can get out here. I'm just an old man, enjoying his retirement." The tall being tilted its head, studying Samuel carefully. "Our sensors detected advanced brain patterns from this location." It pointed at Samuel with a long 4-fingered hand. "Your skin coloration different from humans in media transmissions we received. You are special rank?" This time Samuel did laugh. The idea that these visitors might think dark skin meant higher status struck him as deeply ironic after his lifetime of experiences. "No, not a special rank. Humans come in many colors. My ancestors came from Africa, where darker skin protected people from the hot sun. Other humans have lighter skin based on where their ancestors lived. Unfortunately, some people have treated skin color as more important than it is." The alien seemed confused by this explanation. "Illogical. Protection from solar radiation is advantage. Why would this create negative status?" "That, my new friend, is a very good question that humans have been struggling with for centuries, Samuel replied. He gestured toward his porch. Would you care to sit down? I could make more tea and you could tell me why you've traveled all this way. The alien turned to its companions, and they made quick gestures to each other that Samuel couldn't understand. Then the tall one looked back at Samuel. We accept. We have traveled far. Our world faces danger. Earth may hold solution. Samuel nodded and began walking back to his porch, moving slowly with his cane. The aliens followed at a respectful distance. Buck hid under the porch steps, still unsure about these strange visitors. I'm Samuel Washington, by the way, former professor of theoretical physics at Howard University. We are... The alien made a sound that Samuel's human ears couldn't properly hear, or his human mouth pronounce. Perhaps I could call you something simpler, Samuel suggested. How about Orion? It's a constellation visible from Earth, a group of stars. Orion is acceptable, the alien agreed. We come from direction your people call Canis Major. Samuel smiled as he reached his porch. The dog star. How fitting. He looked down at Buck, still hiding. Don't worry, old friend. I think we're about to have the most interesting conversation of our lives. As Samuel made fresh tea for himself and offered water to his visitors, he had no idea that within days, his peaceful retirement would be shattered by government agents, military personnel, and a confrontation that would test everything he had learned in his long life about courage, wisdom, and the power of simple words to bridge vast differences. The alien sat with Samuel on his porch until late in the night. They drank water while Samuel had his tea. Orion, the leader, told Samuel about their home world, a planet that circled a distant star. Their people had watched Earth for many years, learning human languages from radio and TV signals that traveled through space. Why did you come here? Samuel asked, pouring himself another cup of tea. The night had grown cold, but he was too interested in his guests to go inside. Our star is dying, Orion said. Not today or tomorrow, but soon in cosmic time. We search for new home worlds. Earth has right conditions, but we see it as full. Samuel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Are you planning to take over Earth? The three aliens made a sound that Samuel guessed was their version of laughter. No, too many humans, too different from us. We seek knowledge, not conquest. What knowledge? Samuel asked. Orion pointed to the ground beneath them. Your planet has special minerals in its core. We detected them from space. These minerals could help us build shields for our world, to protect us as our star changes. You want to mine our planet? Samuel frowned. Small amounts only. From deep places where humans do not go. We wish to trade knowledge for resources. Samuel thought about this. As a scientist, he understood the value of sharing information across different fields. How much more valuable would knowledge from another world be? What kind of knowledge would you share? Orion touched a small device on its wrist. A hologram appeared in the air between them, showing mathematical equations that Samuel recognized as being far beyond current human science. Clean energy. Medical. Advances. Better ways to grow food. Orion waved its hand through the hologram, changing the images. We have watched humans fight each other, pollute planet, struggle with disease. We can help. Samuel studied the equations, his old professor's mind coming alive with excitement. This is remarkable, but I'm not sure I'm the right person for you to be talking to. I'm just one old man. We scanned many humans before landing. Your mind. Pattern showed scientific understanding, wisdom, and openness to new ideas. Many humans showed fear patterns when thinking of different beings. Samuel laughed sadly. That doesn't surprise me. Humans often fear what's different. He tapped his dark skin. I've experienced plenty of that in my lifetime. As the night grew later, Samuel showed the aliens inside his cabin. He offered them his spare room to rest in while he took his usual bedroom. Before sleeping, he looked out his window at the alien craft sitting in his clearing, glowing softly, in the moonlight. Part of him wondered if this was all a dream, but his scientist's mind knew better. This was real, and tomorrow would bring new challenges. Samuel woke early the next morning to the sound of helicopters. He got up quickly, his old joints protesting, and looked outside. 3 black helicopters circled above his property. Men in uniforms were setting up a perimeter around his cabin, and several large trucks were parking on the road. Well, that didn't take long, Samuel muttered to himself. He had known this would happen eventually, but he had hoped for more time with his visitors first. He got dressed and went to check on the aliens. They were already awake, standing by the window watching the activity outside. Government forces, Orion said simply. Expected reaction. Are you worried? Samuel asked. No, we came peacefully. Our ship has defenses, but we will not use them unless attacked. Samuel nodded. Good. Let me do the talking when they come. Human governments can be complicated. A voice boomed from outside, coming through a loudspeaker. This is Agent Frank Miller of the United States government. We have detected an unauthorized aircraft on this property. All occupants of the cabin must come out with hands visible. Samuel sighed and reached for his cane. Let's go meet them. Stay behind me and don't make any sudden moves. Buck, who had been hiding under Samuel's bed all night, whined softly. Samuel patted the old dog. You stay here, boy. This isn't your fight. Samuel opened his front door and stepped onto his porch. At least 30 armed men surrounded his cabin, their weapons pointed and ready. Several people in suits stood near, the largest truck watching through binoculars. The alien craft still sat in the clearing, now surrounded by soldiers who kept their distance. I'm coming out, Samuel called. I have guests with me. They are peaceful visitors. He walked slowly, down his porch steps, leaning on his cane. The 3 aliens followed him, their tall forms causing a stir among the soldiers. Some men stepped back in shock while others gripped their weapons tighter. Agent Miller stepped forward, a hand on his gun. He was a middle-aged white man with a stern face and short gray hair. Sir, please step away from those beings. Samuel stayed where he was. These are visitors from another world. They came here peacefully to talk about a scientific exchange. There's no need for all these guns. That's not for you to decide, Miller said. This is a matter of national security. Now please step aside. I'm Samuel Washington, former professor of theoretical physics at Howard University. I'm perfectly capable of understanding the situation we're in. Miller's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at Samuel, and Samuel recognized a familiar expression, the look of someone who saw only his skin color first, not his knowledge or experience. With all due respect, Mr. Washington, this situation requires specialized government handling. Please step aside now. Samuel stood his ground. That's Dr. Washington, Agent Miller, and these beings chose to speak with me first. Perhaps there's a reason for that. Behind him, Orion stepped forward. We come in peace. We seek only knowledge exchange and small resources. Miller's hand tightened on his gun. It speaks English? They've been studying our broadcasts for years, Samuel explained. They know all our major languages. More vehicles were arriving now. Samuel saw people in lab coats carrying scientific equipment. At least someone in the government had been smart enough to bring scientists. This is your last warning, Miller said. Step away from the aliens. Samuel looked at the guns pointed at them, at the fear in the eyes of the soldiers and at the confusion on the faces of the scientists who were being kept back by armed guards. He had seen this kind of fear before, and he knew where it could lead. Agent Miller, Samuel said calmly, his voice carrying across the tense silence. Before you do something we'll all regret, I suggest you listen to what these visitors have to say. Sometimes the greatest danger isn't what's different from us but our reaction to it. Agent Miller did not lower his gun, but he didn't give the order to fire either. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Samuel stood firmly between the aliens and the armed men, his old body straight and tall despite his need for a cane. You have exactly 30 seconds to step aside, Miller said. From one of the larger vehicles, a woman stepped out. She wore a dark suit and moved with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. The soldiers made way for her as she walked toward Agent Miller. Stand down, Agent, she said in a clear voice that carried across the clearing. Miller turned, surprise on his face. Director Clark, I wasn't told you would be on site. Clearly, she said. She turned to look at Samuel and the aliens. I'm Director Helen Clark from the National Science Division, and you must be Dr. Samuel Washington. Samuel raised an eyebrow. You know who I am? Of course. Your work on quantum field theory is still taught in universities today. Her eyes moved to the alien standing behind Samuel. And these are our visitors. Yes, Samuel said. They call themselves a name we can't properly pronounce. I've been calling their leader Orion. Director Clark nodded. Dr. Washington, while I appreciate your handling of first contact, we need to establish proper protocols now. Would you and your guests be willing to come with us to a secure facility for further discussion? Samuel frowned. Locked away in some underground bunker? I don't think that's necessary or helpful. Orion stepped forward to stand beside Samuel. We understand human caution, but we will not be prisoners. We came openly, in peace. Director Clark considered this. What do you suggest? Samuel gestured to his cabin. We were having a perfectly good conversation right here before all the guns showed up. Why not continue it? Bring your scientists. Ask your questions. But do it with respect, not fear. A young soldier nearby whispered something to his companion, and Samuel caught the words, taking orders from, followed by a racial slur. Some things never changed, even when facing beings from another world. Director Clark seemed to be weighing her options. Finally, she nodded. Very well. We'll set up a temporary base here. Agent Miller, have your men fall back to a perimeter position. She turned to the group of scientists who had been waiting by one of the vehicles. Dr. Patel, gather your team. Miller looked like he wanted to argue but followed orders. The soldiers began to move back, though they kept their weapons ready. Thank you, Samuel said to Director Clark. This is the right approach. I hope so, she replied quietly. For all our sakes, within an hour, Samuel's simple cabin had been transformed. Government officials brought in tables, chairs, computers, and all manner of scientific equipment. Samuel watched with amusement, as his quiet retirement home became the center of humanity's first official contact with alien life. Dr. Patel, a bright-eyed woman in her 40s, was clearly excited as she set up her equipment. Dr. Washington, it's an honor to meet you. I studied your papers when I was in graduate school. Always nice to meet a fan, Samuel said with a smile, though I think our new friends are more interesting than an old physicist. Orion and the, other two aliens sat calmly at Samuel's kitchen table, while various instruments scanned them from a respectful distance. They answered basic questions about their biology, their ship, and their homeworld. Their physiology is remarkable, Doctor, Patel said, looking at her readings. They appear to process oxygen much more efficiently than we do, and their cellular structure, I've never seen anything like it. Director Clark kept the meeting on track, asking practical questions about the aliens' intentions. Orion explained, again about their dying star and their need for Earth's rare minerals. The materials we need exist deep in your planet's crust, Orion said. We would extract small amounts using methods that would cause no damage to your environment. And in exchange, Director Clark asked, technology, knowledge, medical advances beyond what humans have developed, energy solutions that do not harm your world. An older man in a military uniform who had been quiet until now spoke up. How do we know this isn't just the first step in an invasion? You could be scouts for a larger force. Samuel sighed, but Orion answered calmly. If we wished to conquer, we would not have landed in one small ship and revealed ourselves to the first human we met. The alien turned to look at the officer. We have observed your species for many years. You often project your own aggressive tendencies onto others. The military man frowned but had no good reply. As the day wore on, more government officials arrived. Samuel found himself pushed more and more to the side as important people from Washington took over the questioning. He sat in his favorite chair by the fireplace watching as humans did what they always did, complicated simple things. Orion, however, kept looking to Samuel whenever a particularly difficult question was asked, as if seeking his input. This did not go unnoticed by the officials, who began to show obvious irritation that the aliens seemed to trust Samuel more than them. Late in the afternoon, a heated argument broke out between different government departments about who had jurisdiction over the aliens. Samuel watched as the visitors observed this display with what he guessed was their version of concern. "Enough," Samuel finally said, rising from his chair. The room grew quiet. "Look at yourselves, the first representatives of another civilization. Travel across the stars to meet us, and all you can do is argue about who gets to control the situation." Director Clark looked embarrassed. "Dr. Washington, there are national security concerns that matter less than the opportunity in front of us," Samuel finished for her. "These beings have technology and knowledge that could solve some of our biggest problems: clean energy, disease, food production. And instead of focusing on that, you're fighting over power and control." The youngest alien, who had been mostly quiet until now, spoke. "We have observed this behavior in your broadcasts. Humans often divide by artificial boundaries. Nations, skin color, beliefs. This makes you weak, not strong." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Several officials looked offended, while others seemed thoughtful. Samuel nodded. "They've been watching our TV and radio for years. They've seen how we treat each other, how we react to differences." He looked at every face in the room. "Maybe it's time we showed them something better." Director Clark looked at her watch. "It's getting late. I suggest we continue this discussion tomorrow. Dr. Washington, would you be willing to continue hosting our guests for the night?" Samuel smiled. "They're welcome to stay as long as they need, though I think my cabin might be a bit crowded now." As people began to pack up equipment and file out, Orion came to stand by Samuel. "Your kind contains great wisdom and great foolishness, often in the same individuals." "That's humanity for you," Samuel replied. "We're complicated. The ones in charge do not listen to you enough," Orion observed, "despite your knowledge." Samuel laughed softly. "Welcome to my entire career. Some things don't change even when aliens land." The next morning, Samuel woke up early. He made coffee in his kitchen while the aliens sat watching him with interest. They had not needed to sleep much, and had spent most of the night studying Samuel's books and old science journals. "Your species learns slowly," Orion said, "but you keep trying. This is good." Samuel laughed as he poured his coffee. "Yes, we're stubborn that way." Looking out his window, Samuel saw that the government had set up a small camp overnight. Tents and equipment surrounded his cabin, and armed guards patrolled the perimeter. His peaceful mountain home had become a military zone. A knock came at the door. Samuel opened it to find Director Clark standing there with Dr. Patel and a man Samuel hadn't met yet. "Good morning, Dr. Washington," Director Clark said. "May we come in? We have important matters to discuss." Samuel stepped aside to let them enter. The new man was tall and wore an expensive suit. He had the look of a politician. "Dr. Washington, these are our visitors from space," the man said, staring at the aliens with barely hidden excitement. "I'm Howard Reed, special advisor to the President. The White House sent me to oversee this situation." "The White House knows already?" Samuel asked. "Of course. This is the most important event in human history." Reed turned to Orion. "On behalf of the President, I welcome you to Earth." Orion gave a slight bow. "Thank you. Your leader shows wisdom in sending a representative so quickly." Samuel could see that Reed was pleased by this response. The man clearly thought he was now in charge of the situation. "We've prepared a proper facility for continued discussions," Reed announced. "Transportation is ready whenever you are. We'll be moving to a secure location where we can speak more comfortably." "This cabin is quite comfortable," Samuel said. "And our visitors chose this location for a reason." Reed smiled, but his eyes were cold. "Dr. Washington, while we appreciate your initial handling of this contact, this matter is now at the highest levels of government. The President himself will want to meet these beings eventually." "And what about their request?" Samuel asked. "They came here for specific minerals to save their world. Have you even discussed that yet?" Reed looked annoyed at being questioned. All matters will be addressed in due time, but first we need proper security and diplomatic protocols. Director Clark spoke up. Dr. Washington, we can ensure that the aliens' needs are discussed, but Mr. Reed is right that we need a more secure location. Samuel looked at Orion, who had been listening quietly. What do you think? Before Orion could answer, Reed cut in. With all due respect, Dr. Washington, this isn't really your decision to make. Samuel felt his temper rising. He had dealt with men like Reed his entire career, men who saw his dark skin and immediately assumed they knew better, regardless of his experience or knowledge. I wasn't asking you, Mr. Reed, Samuel said firmly. I was asking our guests, since they are the ones being asked to move. Reed's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, Orion spoke. We will view this new location, the alien said. But Samuel Washington must come with us. He has shown honesty and respect. These are rare qualities. Reed looked like he wanted to object but forced a smile instead. Of course, Dr. Washington is welcome to join us as a scientific advisor. An hour later, a convoy of black SUVs and military vehicles was ready to depart. The alien's ship had somehow folded itself into a smaller form that could be loaded onto a large flatbed truck, covered with tarps to hide it from view. Samuel packed a small bag with clothes and medications. As he was about to leave his cabin, he looked at Buck, his old dog, who watched him with sad eyes. Don't worry, old friend, Samuel said, patting the dog's head. Mrs. Lewis from down the road is coming to feed you. I'll be back as soon as I can. The journey took several hours. Samuel rode in an SUV with Director Clark and Dr. Patel. The aliens traveled in a separate vehicle with Reed and military guards. Where exactly are we going? Samuel asked. A research facility in Colorado, Director Clark answered. It was built for advanced scientific research, but it's been quickly modified for this situation. Samuel nodded. And what happens when we get there? What's the plan? Dr. Patel looked uncomfortable. There's some disagreement about that. The scientific team wants to focus on knowledge exchange. The military has other concerns. Like what? Samuel asked. They're worried about the technology, Director Clark said quietly. Especially the alien's ship. They want to understand how it works. Samuel frowned. Of course they do. And I'm guessing the alien's request for minerals is being treated as secondary. Neither woman answered, which told Samuel everything he needed to know. The facility turned out to be a large complex built into the side of a mountain. Heavy security surrounded it with multiple checkpoints and armed guards everywhere. Samuel felt his heart sink as they drove through gate after gate. This wasn't the open exchange the aliens had sought. This was containment. Inside, they were led to a conference room with no windows. The walls were lined with monitoring equipment and cameras watched from every corner. Scientists and military personnel waited for them, along with more government officials. The aliens were shown to special chairs designed to accommodate their tall frames. Samuel was seated at the far end of the table, away from the main discussion. The message was clear. He was no longer considered important. Reed took charge of the meeting, welcoming everyone and outlining how the discussions would proceed. Samuel noticed that the word negotiations was used repeatedly, which concerned him. The aliens hadn't come to negotiate. They had come seeking help. As the meeting progressed, Samuel watched with growing frustration. The aliens were asked endless questions about their technology, their ship, their weapons capabilities, but their request for minerals was barely addressed. Finally, Samuel had enough. He stood up, leaning on his cane. Excuse me, he said loudly. Reed looked annoyed at the interruption. Dr. Washington, we're in the middle of important discussions. No, you're in the middle of an interrogation, Samuel replied. These beings came to us for help. Their star is dying. They need specific minerals from Earth to create a shield for their planet. Yet in 2 hours of talking, you've spent maybe 5 minutes on their actual request. The room fell silent. Some of the officials looked embarrassed, while others seemed angry at Samuel's outburst. Dr. Washington, Reed said coldly, these matters are complex. We need to understand all aspects of our visitors before making any commitments. Samuel shook his head. No, What you're doing is treating them like a threat instead of potential friends. You're more interested in their technology than in helping them. One of the military officers spoke up. Their technology could be vital to national security. We have a duty to understand it. And they have a civilization that's dying, Samuel countered. Where's your duty to that? Orion stood up, towering over everyone in the room. Samuel Washington speaks truth. We came in peace, seeking small help for great problem. You ask many questions but offer no answers. The tension in the room was thick. Reed was clearly furious at losing control of the meeting, especially because of Samuel's intervention. Several military officers had their hands near their weapons. Perhaps we should take a short break, Director Clark suggested, trying to diffuse the situation. As people began to file out of the room, Reed approached Samuel. You're undermining delicate negotiations, he hissed. These creatures could have technology that would change the balance of power on Earth. We need to be careful. Samuel looked Reed in the eye. They're not creatures, they're intelligent. Beings who traveled across space to ask for our help. And all you can think about is power. Reed's face hardened. You're being removed from these discussions. Effective immediately. Security will escort you to a waiting area. Before Samuel could protest, 2 guards approached him. As they took his arms to lead him away, Orion stepped between them. Samuel Washington stays, the alien said firmly, or we leave. The room fell silent at Orion's words. The security guards looked to Reed for direction, unsure what to do. Reed's face showed anger and surprise. That's not how this works, Reed said, trying to maintain control. This is a government facility, and we make the rules here. Orion stood tall, its color shifting to a deeper blue. We came to Earth by choice. We can leave by choice. Samuel Washington understands what others here do not. The other 2 aliens moved to stand beside Orion, forming a united front. One of them touched a device on its wrist and a soft humming sound came from somewhere outside the building. What's happening? One of the military officers demanded. Our ship responds to remote commands, Orion explained calmly. It is preparing to leave. We will be on it. Director Clark stepped forward quickly. Mr. Reed, I suggest we reconsider. Forcing Dr. Washington to leave clearly upsets our visitors. Reed looked trapped. He glanced around the room, seeing the concerned faces of the scientists and the tense postures of the military officers. Finally, he nodded stiffly. Fine. Dr. Washington can stay as a consultant. He pointed a finger at Samuel. But you will follow proper protocols. Samuel simply nodded, hiding his relief. He had no actual power here, but at least he could still advocate for the aliens. Thank you, Samuel said to Orion as they returned to their seats. But you didn't need to risk your mission for me. We did, Orion replied. You are the only human who listens without fear or greed. We need such a voice. The meeting resumed, but the tone had changed. Reed was more careful now, and others in the room seemed to pay more attention to Samuel. When Samuel spoke, people listened, though not always happily. After several more hours of discussion, a plan began to take shape. Scientists would work with the aliens to identify exactly which minerals they needed and where on Earth they could be found. A small team would be formed to help them extract these materials using the aliens' technology, which could reach deep into the Earth without causing damage. In exchange, the aliens would share knowledge in specific areas: clean energy, medical, treatments, and agricultural methods. They would not share weapons technology or anything that could upset the balance of power between nations. As the meeting continued, Samuel noticed that Reed was constantly on his phone, stepping out of the room to make calls. Something didn't feel right about it. During a short break, Dr. Patel approached Samuel. Dr. Washington, I need to tell you something, she said quietly, looking around to make sure no one was listening. I overheard Reed on a call. There's another plan being developed. Once they get the aliens' technology, they're going to restrict their movement, maybe even prevent them from leaving Earth. Samuel felt his stomach tighten. They're planning to betray them? Dr. Patel nodded. Some people see their technology as too valuable to let go, especially their ship. Samuel looked across the room where Orion was speaking with Director Clark. "I need to warn them." "Be careful," Dr. Patel whispered. "Reed has a lot of power. Here." When the meeting resumed, Samuel paid close attention to Reed and the military officials. He could see it now, the way they avoided specific commitments about when the aliens would be allowed to leave, the subtle emphasis on extended research collaboration. As the day grew late, Reed announced that quarters had been prepared for everyone to stay the night. "We'll continue discussions in the morning," he said. "Our visitors will be shown to special accommodations designed for their comfort." The way he said accommodations made Samuel suspicious. He quietly approached Director Clark as people were leaving the room. "Those special accommodations sound more like a cell than a hotel room," he said. Director Clark looked uncomfortable. "It's a secure area, yes, for their protection. And once they're in this secure area, will they be able to leave it?" Samuel asked. She didn't answer, which told Samuel everything he needed to know. As everyone filed out, Samuel managed to walk next to Orion. "Don't go to their special rooms," he whispered. "I think they plan to hold you here." Orion gave a slight nod. "We suspected this might happen. Humans desire our technology too much." "What will you do?" Samuel asked. "We prepared for this possibility," Orion replied quietly. "But we need your help one more time." Samuel nodded. "Tell me what you need." Later that night, as most of the facility slept, alarms suddenly blared throughout the building. Red lights flashed in the corridors as security personnel ran toward the aliens' quarters. Samuel, who had been waiting in his own room, stepped out into the hallway. Reed appeared, still wearing his suit despite the late hour. "What's happening?" he demanded of a passing guard. "The aliens, sir. They've disappeared from their rooms." Reed's face turned red with anger. "That's impossible. Those rooms were sealed and guarded." At that moment, more shouts came from down another hallway. "The ship! It's activating!" Reed turned to Samuel with suspicious eyes. "Did you know about this?" Before Samuel could answer, the entire facility shook slightly. The lights flickered. "Everyone to the main entrance now," a voice shouted over the intercom. People poured out of rooms and rushed toward the facility's large entrance doors. Samuel followed more slowly, leaning on his cane. By the time he reached the entrance, a crowd had gathered outside, staring up at the night sky. The aliens' ship hovered above the facility, glowing with soft blue light. It had somehow broken free from where it had been stored and now floated 50 feet above the ground. Soldiers had their weapons pointed at it, but no one was firing. Reed pushed through the crowd, shouting into a radio. "I want that ship grounded. Now. Use whatever force necessary." A beam of light suddenly appeared from the ship, touching the ground near where Samuel stood. In the center of the light stood Orion. "Samuel Washington," the alien called. "It is time." Reed turned to see Samuel, walking toward the light. "Stop him," he shouted. Several guards moved to intercept Samuel, but Director Clark stepped in their way. "Let him go," she said firmly. Samuel walked into the light and stood beside Orion. The alien handed him a small cube that glowed with an inner light. "What is this?" Samuel asked. "The knowledge we promised," Orion said. "Clean energy, medical advances, better ways to grow food, all of it, freely given." Samuel looked down at the cube in his hand, then up at the angry, confused faces watching from outside the light. "Why give it to me?" he asked. "Because you will share it fairly," Orion replied. "You understand that knowledge belongs to all, not just the powerful." Samuel nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. "What about the minerals you needed?" "We found enough in the soil samples we collected during our short time here. It will be sufficient." Orion looked toward the crowd. "It is time for us to leave. Your people are not yet ready for more." Samuel understood. "Will you return someday?" "Perhaps, when humanity has grown beyond its fears and divisions." Orion raised a hand in farewell. "You showed us the best of your kind, Samuel Washington. Remember that there are others like you, working for a better world. Find them, Share what we have given you. The light began to brighten around them. Samuel heard Reed shouting orders and saw soldiers raising their weapons. Knowledge before fear, humanity's only hope, Samuel called out, his voice carrying across the night air. The armed men hesitated, their fingers on triggers but not firing. Samuel looked at Reed and the others one last time, then handed the glowing cube to Director Clark, who had stepped into the edge of the light. Make sure this gets to the right people, he said. People who will use it to help everyone, not just the powerful. She took the cube with a nod, understanding in her eyes. The light faded, leaving Samuel standing alone as the ship rose higher into the night sky. In moments, it was just a distant point of light, then gone completely. Reed stormed over to Samuel, his face twisted with rage. Do you have any idea what you've done? The technology we've lost? Samuel looked at the man calmly. I helped make sure humanity got exactly what it needed, not what it wanted. He glanced at the cube now in Director Clark's hands. And that's more valuable than any weapon. As dawn broke over the mountains, Samuel Washington sat in a government car heading back toward his cabin in Montana. They hadn't arrested him, though Reed had wanted to. Director Clark had intervened, pointing out that charging an elderly, respected scientist would raise too many questions. Samuel smiled as he watched the sunrise. Buck would be waiting for him. His quiet retirement would resume. But he knew that, somewhere out there, beyond the stars, friends were carrying a small piece of Earth back to their dying world. And here on Earth, a small cube held the seeds of a better future. Sometimes, he thought, the greatest power lay not in weapons or technology, but in simple words spoken at the right moment. Knowledge before fear, humanity's only hope.